The security footage lasted 17 seconds, and those 17 seconds destroyed Talia Mercer's entire life. For nearly 3 months, federal investigators replayed the video hundreds of times. A nurse exited Mercy Heights Medical Center. A black SUV pulled alongside the curb. 3 men stepped out. The nurse disappeared. Then the vehicle vanished into the night. 17 seconds. That was all it took. No ransom demand ever arrived. No body was discovered. No credible witnesses came forward. The case quickly became one of the city's most unsettling mysteries. News stations covered it relentlessly. Volunteers organized search parties. Social media users turned the disappearance into endless theories. Some believed human traffickers were responsible. Others suspected a jealous ex-boyfriend. A few even claimed government involvement. Everyone had opinions. Nobody had answers, especially because the victim made no sense. Talia Mercer wasn't wealthy. She wasn't famous. She wasn't politically connected. At 31 years old, she spent most of her life caring for people who often forgot her name the moment they left the hospital. Her world consisted of double shifts, aching feet, and responsibilities that never seemed to end. Most mornings began before sunrise. Most nights ended long after exhaustion had taken hold. After losing her parents years earlier, Talia moved in with her widowed aunt. Together they shared bills, responsibilities, and the constant challenge of making ends meet. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and despite everything, Talia remained kind. Patients adored her. Cowworkers relied on her. Families remembered her long after their loved ones left the hospital. Yet outside those walls, people often noticed different things. Her weight, her appearance, the way she never quite fit society's expectations. Strangers offered advice she never requested. Cowworkers occasionally made jokes they thought she couldn't hear. Even dates sometimes treated her like a backup plan rather than a person. Talia rarely responded. She had learned long ago that some people saw only what they wanted to see. The strongest people weren't always the loudest. Sometimes, they were simply the ones who kept showing up despite being overlooked. On the night everything changed, Talia finished a 14-hour shift. The hospital hallways had finally quieted. Her shoulders ached. Her legs felt heavy. All she wanted was sleep. As she exited the building, cool night air greeted her. The parking lot was nearly empty. She adjusted the strap of her bag and began walking toward the bus stop, completely unaware that someone was watching. Miles away, another man studied photographs spread across a conference table. Salvatore D'Amico, a name that carried enough weight to make powerful people nervous. Business executives feared him. Criminals feared him. Even politicians chose their words carefully when speaking about him. For weeks, Salvatore had been hunting a traitor hidden somewhere inside his organization. Someone was feeding information to his enemies. Someone wanted him dead. And according to the intelligence reports now sitting before him, the key to finding that person was a nurse named Talia. Unfortunately, intelligence reports can be wrong, and mistakes become dangerous when powerful men stop asking questions. Back outside the hospital, headlights suddenly appeared beside the curb. A black SUV rolled to a stop next to Talia. The rear door opened. 3 men stepped out. Talia slowed, confused. One of them looked directly at her, then spoke her name, and in that moment, her ordinary life came to an abrupt end. When Talia regained consciousness, her first thought was that she was dead. The room was too beautiful. Sunlight spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows. White curtains moved gently in the ocean breeze. The bed beneath her felt softer than anything she had ever slept on. For several seconds, she simply stared at the ceiling, trying to understand where she was. Then memory returned. The hospital, the SUV, the men. Panic hit instantly. Talia sat upright, so fast her head began spinning. She swung her legs off the bed and hurried toward the nearest door. Locked. She tried another. Locked. Her breathing quickened. The room looked luxurious, but the reality became clear almost immediately. This wasn't a guest room. It was a prison. A beautiful prison. And beautiful prisons were still prisons. For the next hour, she searched every corner of the suite. Every window, every exit, nothing. The windows were reinforced. The doors required electronic access. Even the balcony overlooked walls high enough to discourage escape. Someone had invested a great deal of money into making sure nobody left without permission. Eventually, the door opened. 2 armed guards entered. Neither spoke. A third figure followed behind them. The atmosphere changed instantly. The guards stood straighter, more alert, more cautious. Talia didn't need an introduction. She knew exactly who he was. Salvatore D'Amico, the man from countless newspaper articles and whispered rumors. He looked even more intimidating in person. Not because he was physically imposing, because of the confidence, the certainty, the calmness of someone accustomed to controlling every situation. His gaze settled on her, evaluating, calculating, as though she were evidence instead of a person. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble," he said. Talia stared at him in disbelief. "I've caused you trouble?" Her voice cracked slightly. "You kidnapped me." His expression remained unchanged. "You're connected to people who want me dead." For a moment, Talia wondered if she had misheard him. Then she laughed. A short, disbelieving laugh. The accusation was so absurd she couldn't stop herself. The guards immediately stiffened. Salvatore's eyes narrowed. "You find this amusing?" "No." Talia shook her head. "I find it insane." The room became very quiet. She expected anger, perhaps even violence. Instead, Salvatore simply watched her, as though trying to determine whether she was lying. "I'm a nurse," Talia said. "I work 12-hour shifts, 14-hour shifts sometimes. I spend my days trying to keep strangers alive." She folded her arms. "You think I'm secretly involved in an assassination plot?" The absurdity hung in the air. Yet Salvatore didn't seem convinced. Power had taught him to trust information over people. And somewhere in his network, information insisted Talia Mercer was dangerous. Unfortunately, information wasn't always correct. Before leaving, Salvatore placed a folder on the table. "Everything points to you." The door closed behind him. Minutes later, Talia opened the folder. Photographs, phone records, surveillance images. Most meant nothing to her. Then she froze. One photograph showed a woman entering a parking garage. The image was blurry, the angle poor. But something immediately stood out. The woman wasn't her. The same hair color, the same hospital uniform, the same first name listed beneath the image, but a completely different face. And suddenly, Talia realized something terrifying. Someone had made a mistake. A very dangerous mistake. The photograph stayed on Talia's mind for the rest of the night. She studied it repeatedly, again and again and again. The woman in the image wore the same hospital uniform, worked in the same department, even shared the same first name. But she wasn't Talia Mercer. The difference seemed obvious, at least to Talia. Apparently not to the men who had abducted her. The realization filled her with equal parts hope and frustration. Hope because there had clearly been a mistake. Frustration because nobody seemed interested in admitting it. The next morning, Salvatore returned. Talia immediately placed the photograph in front of him. "Look at this." He barely glanced at it. "I already have." "No, actually look." Her patience was wearing thin. "This woman isn't me." Salvatore's expression remained unreadable. That's what innocent people usually say. Talia stared at him. For several seconds, she couldn't decide whether to scream or laugh. You kidnapped the wrong person. Maybe. The answer surprised her. It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't certainty either. For the first time, a small crack appeared in his confidence, a crack he quickly tried to hide. The days that followed became a battle of endurance. Talia continued insisting she was innocent. Salvatore continued investigating. Neither trusted the other. Neither backed down. Yet something unusual began happening. The staff inside the mansion started liking her. One afternoon, a housekeeper accidentally cut her hand while preparing flowers. Talia immediately helped. The following day, one of the guards twisted his ankle during training. She helped him too. Nobody asked her to. Nobody forced her. She simply couldn't ignore someone in pain. It was who she was. Word spread quickly. The prisoner kept helping people. The supposed threat treated injuries, offered advice, checked medications, answered health questions. The behavior didn't fit the profile Salvatore had been given. The contradiction bothered him more than he wanted to admit. One evening, he reviewed the evidence again. Phone records, surveillance photos, financial transactions. The pieces fit together. Yet somehow they also didn't. Every answer seemed to create another question. Across the mansion, another man watched the investigation with growing concern. Marco Ricci, Salvatore's second-in-command. One of his most trusted advisors. A man who had stood beside him for nearly a decade. Marco noticed something dangerous. Salvatore was beginning to doubt, and doubt threatened everything. Late that night, Marco entered a private office where several investigation files were stored. The mansion was quiet. Most people were asleep. No witnesses. No interruptions. He unlocked a cabinet and removed a folder. Inside were newly recovered documents. Documents linking another nurse to the conspiracy. Documents Salvatore had not yet reviewed. Marco stared at them for several moments, then calmly fed the papers into a shredder. The machine swallowed the evidence piece by piece. By morning, nothing remained. No proof, no record, no way for Salvatore to discover the truth, at least not yet. Elsewhere in the mansion, Talia sat alone beside a window overlooking the ocean. She didn't know someone had just destroyed evidence that could have freed her. She only knew one thing. The longer she stayed here, the more convinced she became that someone wanted the truth buried. And somewhere inside the mansion, that person was much closer than anyone realized. The emergency began at exactly 8:17 p.m. One moment, the mansion was quiet. The next, chaos erupted. Talia heard shouting from somewhere downstairs. Then footsteps, fast, panicked. A door slammed. Someone yelled for a doctor. Her instincts immediately sharpened. Years of nursing had trained her to recognize certain sounds. Fear had a distinct voice, and the voices echoing through the mansion were filled with it. Talia moved toward the bedroom door. Seconds later, it swung open. One of the guards appeared. His face was pale, desperate. For the first time since her arrival, he looked less like a security professional and more like a frightened son. "We need help."
Talia didn't hesitate. What happened?
"It's his mother." They were already moving before he finished speaking. The dining room looked like a disaster scene. Several people crowded around an older woman lying on the floor. Some were shouting. Others were crying. Nobody seemed to know what to do. At the center of it all stood Salvatore, frozen not from weakness, from fear. The woman on the floor was the only person in the world who mattered more to him than power. And she wasn't breathing properly. Talia dropped to her knees instantly. Training took over. The room disappeared. The panic disappeared. Everything except the patient disappeared. "Move back," she ordered. Nobody argued, not even Salvatore. Talia checked the woman's pulse. Weak, dangerously weak. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale. The signs were alarming. How long has she been like this? 2 minutes, maybe 3. Talia nodded. Every second mattered. She began issuing instructions. Firm, precise, confident. People obeyed without thinking. One guard called emergency services. Another retrieved medical supplies. Someone else brought water. For nearly 20 minutes, Talia worked without stopping, monitoring, stabilizing, adjusting, fighting. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness several times. Each episode felt worse than the last. At one point, even Talia feared she might lose her, but she refused to quit. Not while there was still a chance. Not while someone needed her. Finally, distant sirens echoed through the night. Paramedicus arrived moments later. Talia quickly briefed them, explained symptoms, explained interventions, explained everything they needed to know. The transition happened seamlessly, exactly as it should. As the medical team prepared to leave, one of the paramedics glanced toward Talia, then nodded, a silent acknowledgement between professionals. You gave her a chance. Hours later, the mansion sat in uneasy silence. Everyone waited. No one slept. Near midnight, the family physician finally returned from the hospital. The entire household gathered in the main living room. Salvatore stood first. How is she? The doctor removed his glasses. Exhaustion showed on his face. But relief did too. She's stable. The room collectively exhaled. Several people visibly relaxed. Then the doctor looked directly at Salvatore. His next words changed everything. If Nurse Mercer hadn't acted when she did, your mother would be dead. Silence followed, heavy, unavoidable. Salvatore slowly turned toward Talia. For the first time since her arrival, he wasn't looking at a suspect. He wasn't looking at a potential enemy. He was looking at the woman who had just saved the most important person in his life. And for the first time, doubt became impossible to ignore. The doctor's words refused to leave Salvatore's mind. If Nurse Mercer hadn't acted when she did, your mother would be dead. For days afterward, the sentence echoed through every conversation, every meeting, every quiet moment. Salvatore had spent his life learning to read people. Deception, fear, greed, he understood them all. Yet the woman living inside his mansion continued to make no sense. A trained assassin would not save his mother. A conspirator would not risk her own freedom to preserve the life of someone connected to her captor. Nothing about Talia's actions matched the accusations against her. And for the first time since her abduction, Salvatore began questioning the investigation itself. He ordered every file reopened, every photograph re-examined, every witness statement reviewed from the beginning. The decision irritated several people inside his organization, especially Marco Ricci. The more Salvatore searched, the closer he came to discovering things that were never meant to be found. 3 days later, one of Salvatore's analysts arrived carrying a folder. His face was unusually pale, concerned, nervous. Boss, you need to see this. Salvatore opened the file. Inside sat 2 employee records from Mercy Heights Medical Center. 2 nurses, 2 women, both named Talia. For several seconds he simply stared. The same first name, the same department, the same hospital, the same shift rotation. Yet they were entirely different people, different birthdays, different addresses, different histories. A cold realization settled over the room. One nurse had quietly cooperated with federal investigators. The other worked overtime shifts and spent weekends helping her aunt pay bills. Salvatore's jaw tightened. The mistake was undeniable. His people had abducted the wrong woman. Weeks of captivity, weeks of fear, weeks of suffering, all because powerful men failed to verify basic information. Across the mansion, Talia was reading beside a window when Salvatore entered. She immediately recognized something had changed. His expression looked different, less certain, less controlled. He closed the door behind him. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, he handed her the folder. Talia opened it. Read the first page, then the second, then the third. With each document, the truth became clearer. By the time she finished, anger had replaced shock. Not explosive anger, the quiet kind. The kind that hurts more. You kidnapped me because someone didn't do their job. Salvatore said nothing. There was no defense, no explanation, no excuse. The silence itself was an answer. Months of her life had been stolen. Not because she was guilty, because someone had been careless. Talia closed the file. You can take me home now. The words sounded simple, reasonable, final. And for a brief moment, Salvatore believed they would be. Then his phone rang. He answered immediately, listened, and felt the situation collapse all over again. The call lasted less than a minute. When it ended, his expression had darkened. Talia noticed instantly. What happened? Salvatore lowered the phone. The nurse we were actually looking for was found dead this morning. A chill moved through the room. Before either could process the news, another message arrived. This one worse. Someone had been asking questions about Talia, following her aunt, watching her old apartment. The people behind the conspiracy now believed she knew too much, and suddenly, going home became the most dangerous option of all. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The news settled heavily between them. The real target was dead, and somehow Talia had inherited her danger. She stared at Salvatore. You expect me to believe that? The question came out sharper than she intended. Months of frustration, months of fear, months of helplessness finally pushed through. Salvatore didn't react. Believe whatever you want. His voice remained calm, but my people confirmed it. Talia folded her arms tightly. You've already kidnapped the wrong person once. The words landed exactly where she intended. A flash of guilt crossed his face before disappearing. Too quick for most people to notice. Not quick enough for her. For the first time since meeting him, Talia realized something important. Salvatore D'Amico wasn't struggling to convince her. He was struggling to forgive himself. 3 days later, she still hadn't left. Not because she wanted to stay. Because every security report said the same thing. Someone was actively looking for her. Someone connected to the people who had wanted the other nurse dead. The safest place remained the mansion. The irony wasn't lost on her. The place that had once felt like a prison now functioned as protection. Not freedom, but protection. The distinction mattered, at least a little. Life inside the mansion gradually changed. The guards stopped treating her like a threat. The staff greeted her warmly. Salvatore's mother insisted she join her for breakfast several mornings each week. The older woman remembered very little about the medical emergency, but she remembered enough. Enough to know Talia had saved her life. One afternoon, Talia found herself sitting on a terrace, overlooking the ocean. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks below created a rare sense of peace. She heard footsteps behind her. Salvatore. He carried 2 cups of coffee. Without speaking, he placed one beside her, then sat down. For several minutes, neither touched their drinks. The silence felt strangely comfortable, not forced, not awkward, just quiet. Eventually, Talia glanced toward him. Do you always assume you're right? The question surprised him. A small smile appeared despite himself. Not always. Most of the time, probably. That earned the first genuine laugh he'd heard from her. A brief one. but real. The moment disappeared almost immediately. Still, both noticed it. As the weeks passed, trust developed in small ways. Not through grand gestures, through observation, shared conversations, mutual respect. Talia saw a side of Salvatore that never appeared in newspaper headlines. He checked on his mother every evening, remembered employees' names, funded hospitals anonymously. The discoveries didn't excuse what he had done, but they complicated him, and complicated people were harder to hate. One evening, everything changed again. A black sedan exploded at the front gates. The blast shook windows throughout the mansion. Alarms erupted instantly. Guards rushed into position. Talia's heart nearly stopped. The attack lasted less than 2 minutes. By the time it ended, security forces had neutralized the threat. But the message remained clear. Someone wanted access to the estate. Someone wanted someone inside it dead. Hours later, investigators reviewed evidence recovered from the vehicle. The conclusion chilled everyone. The attack wasn't aimed solely at Salvatore. It was aimed at both of them. And somewhere in the shadows, an enemy was becoming increasingly desperate. The attack on the mansion changed everything. Until then, many people had believed the danger would eventually fade, that whoever was behind the conspiracy would disappear once their plans collapsed. The explosion proved otherwise. Someone was still fighting, still planning, still willing to kill, and desperation made people dangerous. The investigation expanded immediately. Every phone call was reviewed, every financial record examined, every trusted ally scrutinized. For years, Salvatore had believed his greatest threats came from outside his organization. Rival crime families, competing interests, government investigations. He was wrong. The threat had been sitting beside him all along. 3 days after the attack, investigators uncovered a hidden series of bank accounts. The transactions stretched back nearly a decade. Millions of dollars had quietly disappeared. Shell companies masked ownership. False contracts disguised payments. The deeper they looked, the clearer the pattern became. Someone inside Salvatore's inner circle had been building a private empire, piece by piece, year after year. The name attached to every trail was the same: Marco Ricci, Salvatore's second-in-command, his advisor, his friend, the man he trusted more than almost anyone else. The discovery felt like a punch to the chest. Not because Marco had stolen money, because betrayal always hurts more when it comes from someone you respect. Salvatore personally reviewed the evidence. Every document, every transaction, every message. The conclusion became impossible to deny. Marco had manipulated investigations, redirected suspicion, arranged murders, and, most importantly, engineered the circumstances that led to Talia's kidnapping. The wrong nurse had become useful, a convenient distraction. A mistake Marco never intended to correct, because confusion created opportunities, and opportunities created power. Meanwhile, Talia noticed something the investigators initially missed: a pattern buried inside several communication logs. Repeated dates, repeated locations, repeated references to medical shipments. At first glance, the information seemed insignificant, but years of nursing had taught her to recognize supply chain terminology. The language wasn't random. The shipments had been used to transport money and information without attracting attention. When she pointed it out, the room fell silent. Several analysts immediately began checking her theory. Hours later, they confirmed it. Talia was right, again. The discovery connected Marco to several operations previously considered unrelated. For perhaps the 10th time since arriving at the mansion, she solved a problem experienced investigators had overlooked. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially Salvatore. The woman he once viewed as a suspect had become one of his most valuable allies. Late that evening, security forces moved to arrest Marco. Teams were dispatched simultaneously. Safe houses were raided, offices searched, property secured. Everything happened quickly, efficiently, professionally. Yet, when officers arrived at Marco's primary residence, they found only an empty house. No Marco, no records, no electronics, nothing. He had vanished. The news arrived shortly after midnight. Salvatore listened in silence, then ended the call. Talia already knew the answer before he spoke. He got away. Salvatore nodded. His expression remained calm, too calm, because both of them understood what the escape really meant. A desperate traitor with nothing left to lose was now somewhere beyond their reach, and desperate men rarely stop until someone is buried. Marco Ricci remained missing for 11 days. 11 days of silence. 11 days of dead ends. 11 days of wondering when the next attack would come. Every lead investigators followed seemed to disappear moments before they arrived. Safe houses were abandoned. Phone numbers disconnected. Bank accounts emptied. It was as if Marco anticipated every move before it happened. The possibility unsettled everyone, because it suggested he still had help. Somewhere, someone remained loyal to him, and loyalty made dangerous men even more dangerous. On the 12th day, the breakthrough finally came. One of Marco's former associates attempted to leave the country using a forged passport. Authorities intercepted him before departure. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he agreed to cooperate. The information he provided changed everything. Marco wasn't hiding. He was preparing for one final move. The associate revealed the location of a private compound several hours inland, a property purchased years earlier through multiple shell corporations. The perfect place to disappear, or launch a final attack. Salvatore wasted no time. Before sunrise, vehicles were already moving toward the compound. Talia remained behind initially, until she discovered something investigators had overlooked. A series of handwritten notes recovered from Marco's office. The notes referenced the same compound, but one detail stood out. The attack wasn't scheduled for the future. It was scheduled for that very day. Marco wasn't hiding, he was waiting. By the time she reached Salvatore through a secure call, teams were already approaching the property. The warning changed everything. Instead of walking into an ambush, security forces altered their strategy, surrounded the compound, blocked escape routes, forced Marco into a position he couldn't control. The confrontation lasted less than an hour. Years of manipulation collapsed in a single morning. Evidence was recovered, accounts seized, associates arrested. The empire Marco secretly built began falling apart almost immediately. For a man who spent years controlling events from the shadows, the ending felt strangely ordinary, not dramatic, not glorious, just inevitable. By sunset, the threat that had haunted them for months was over. The investigations continued. The legal consequences would take years, but the danger itself had ended. For the first time since her abduction, Talia felt something she had nearly forgotten: freedom. That evening, she returned to her room and began packing. The simple act felt surreal. Clothes folded into a suitcase, books stacked carefully, personal belongings gathered together. A life interrupted, a life finally moving again. Part of her felt relieved. Another part felt strangely sad. The realization bothered her more than she wanted to admit. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened. Salvatore stood in the doorway. Neither spoke immediately. The silence carried a different weight now. No accusations, no investigations, no danger, only the reality they had both been avoiding. Talia glanced toward the suitcase resting beside the bed, then back at him. "The threat is gone." Salvatore nodded. "Yes." For a moment, neither moved, neither looked away. Because they both understood what came next. Tomorrow, she would leave, and for the first time since the kidnapping, there would be nothing stopping her. The next morning arrived too quickly. Sunlight spilled through the bedroom windows as Talia's zipped the final compartment of her suitcase. For months, she had dreamed about leaving, dreamed about sleeping in her own bed, seeing her aunt, returning to the life that had been stolen from her. Now that the moment had finally arrived, the emotions felt far more complicated than she expected. The mansion had begun as a prison. There was no changing that. No amount of kindness or regret could erase what had happened. Yet somewhere between the investigations, the danger, and the long conversations that followed, something had changed. Not the past, the people living inside it. A knock sounded at the door. Talia already knew who it was. "Come in." Salvatore entered quietly. For once he wore no expression of authority, no carefully controlled confidence, no emotional armor. He simply looked tired, as though he hadn't slept. Neither spoke immediately. The silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Finally, Talia looked at him. "I should probably thank you." A faint smile appeared. "For kidnapping you." Despite everything, she laughed. The sound surprised both of them. "For helping fix the mess afterward." The smile disappeared, and something heavier took its place. Regret, real regret, the kind that couldn't be hidden behind power or excuses. Salvatore lowered his eyes briefly, then looked back at her. "Talia." His voice was quieter than usual. "I owe you an apology." The words hung in the air, simple, yet surprisingly difficult. Powerful men rarely apologized, especially men like Salvatore. "I should have listened." He took a slow breath. "I should have questioned the information. I should have verified everything." The honesty in his voice made it impossible to doubt him. "You lost months of your life because of my arrogance." Talia remained silent, not because she disagreed, because hearing him admit it mattered more than she expected. For the first time since her abduction, someone was taking responsibility. No excuses, no justifications, just truth. Salvatore stepped closer. Not enough to crowd her, just enough to be heard. "Money can't fix what happened." He shook his head. "Neither can influence." A bitter smile crossed his face. "I've spent most of my life believing every problem had a solution." His gaze met hers. "This one doesn't." The vulnerability surprised her, because, for the first time, he wasn't speaking like a man accustomed to controlling outcomes. He was speaking like someone afraid of one. Finally, he said the thing both of them had felt coming for weeks. "I don't want you to leave." The confession settled softly between them. Not possessive, not demanding, honest. Talia's heart tightened because she knew exactly what he meant. Not because he wanted a prisoner, because he wanted her, the woman who challenged him, questioned him, forced him to become someone better than he had been. Outside the window, waves crashed gently against the shoreline. Life continued moving forward, as it always did. Months earlier, Salvatore D'Amico had searched relentlessly for an enemy hiding in the shadows. Instead, he found the woman who changed the way he saw the world. And perhaps life's greatest irony is that the worst mistake we ever make can sometimes lead us to the truth we needed most.